Hello, welcome back. If you visited here before and you weren't here for the trains, you may have seen a couple of solo games that I posted here on YouTube using Dragon Rampant rules printed by Osprey and written by Dan Mersey. This book first came out in 2015 following Lion Rampant, its historical medieval brother. And since then there's been a few more games published by Osprey, taking the Rampant series into pike and shot, horse and musket, and even sci-fi games actually with Xenos Rampant. It's a tabletop miniatures big skirmish game for about 30 to 60 figures. The rules are simple, but they are innovative and they give a good narrative game. Dan Mersey describes the game as a sandbox, and they aren't tied to any particular figure manufacturers or fantasy genre. Like many wargamers, I'm a bit of a butterfly and I buy lots of rules and play them sometimes, mostly historical games. But this is one game that's really stood the test of time and I keep coming back to either solo or with chums. Lion Rampant had a beautiful hardback second edition in 2022. And now it's time for Dragon Rampant Second Edition. So hello and welcome to this first look at Dragon Rampant Second Edition. Osprey Games kindly sent me an advance copy, but to be clear, I'm not being asked to do anything or being paid to review, so this is all my personal take really on this new book. I've had a read through. I've not yet played the game, so this really is a sort of first look as opposed to a proper detailed review. I will be posting a playthrough sometime in the near future, either solo or probably with one of the chums actually. So let's have a look at some of the things that have stood out for me in this new edition of Dragon Rampant. Okay, so here we are. Second edition of Dragon Rampant. So this format is very similar to the Lion Rampant. Hardback, much thicker than the original blue book. Osprey, we're looking at about 230 odd pages altogether. And if you've seen any of these sort of books before from Osprey, you know what to expect. They are absolutely gorgeous. I think in this case, a lot of the artwork has probably been commissioned specifically for these rules. I don't hold me to that. But I know that with Osprey books generally, they can call on quite a rich history of some beautiful artwork of historical nature from all their other books. Sort of, I mean, that ties in very nicely with all of the North Star or Oathmark sort of undead, doesn't it? They've got a rich history of sort of art to draw on to populate their books. I think a lot of this stuff, as I say, has probably been commissioned specifically, and it is absolutely gorgeous, along with, of course, lots of photos of painted minis. What I like about this, and was true in the original rules as well, some of these are Dan's own figures, but some of the contributors, they aren't necessarily the latest and greatest. There's some real classic old figures represented in the photographs in I love that one. That was in the original Dragon Rampant as well. Anyway, from a presentation perspective, absolutely gorgeous rulebook. If you're like me and you like collecting rulebooks anyway, this is a great one for the shelf. Contents right up front, very easy to find whatever it is you're looking for. The rules are very consistently laid out. Very easy to find, as I say, the sort of sections that you're looking for. What you tend to find with Dragon Rampant is that once you've played a few games, you very rarely refer to the rules. It's more sort of in between when you're sort of building your armies and campaigns and stuff, which we'll come on to shortly. I've never found the quick reference sheets to be that great. I like to keep quick reference sheets to 2 sides, absolute maximum, perhaps even 1. So, yeah. So presentation wise, beautiful, heavy book, lovely illustrations, really well laid out, easy to find the rules you need. As regards what's changed in this version from the original edition, the first edition of Dragon Rampant. Dan addresses that up front on page 10, actually, what's changed. And essentially, not a huge amount. So, well, I say that the rules themselves haven't had a major overhaul. So it's still, at its core, the same Dragon Rampant rule set that we know and love. What Dan has done is made some tweaks, and I'll address one or two of those that I've picked up on already, clarified some rules, and essentially added loads of detail. And that's not unnecessary detail that slows stuff down. It's absolutely detail that enhances the rules, allows you to add even more flavour to what are essentially, as I described earlier, a set of rules that give you a narrative game. So a couple of the changes that I've picked up on. First of all, the armies used to be, in the original set, was set at 24 army points was the standard size for an army for Dragon Rampant. I always found that a little bit restrictive. I think in one or two of my videos before, you may have seen I've used 30 points. And if you watch any other videos on YouTube, people playing Dragon Rampant, they typically expand that 24 army points to sort of 30 or 36. And actually 30 army points is now the standard. That allows you to field generally the figures that you want, but then add those sort of extra enhancements, things like magical, fantastical abilities and so on as well, to make that game a little bit more interesting. So 30 army points is the standard, but there are options for both 24 and 36 point armies, and in fact larger than that if you want to as well. One key thing with Dragon Rampant, if you've not played it before, is units are generally made up of typically 12 or 6 strength points. You can represent that with 12 or 6 figures. So my infantry units tend to have 12 figures, cavalry units have 6, but it's actually can be represented with either reduced models, so reduced model count. So you could use, for example, 3 ogres to represent a 6 strength point or 12 strength point unit, or even single models. So if you've got a hero, that hero could actually be given 12 strength points to represent something like heavy foot. And as long as you're marking the hit points with a small dice or counters or whatever, that works okay. So you can, there's a lot of flexibility in how you're building the armies that you're fielding. So another thing that Dan's done with this set is we've got a lot of these, I don't know what you call them, cutaway boxes or design notes scattered throughout the rules, really, partly to explain what's happening and his thinking behind the rules and so on. But we do have some alternative rules and optional rules scattered through here as well. One in particular that I would imagine most people are quite interested in is the failed activations rule. So in the original Dragon Rampant set, you roll a dice for each unit when you choose to activate that unit. If you fail to activate that unit, so if it doesn't roll high enough to do the thing it wants to do, that's the end of your turn and you pass over to the other player. Now, a lot of players I know weren't keen on that system. They felt it didn't give them enough control and introduced their own sort of hacks, if you like, where if you failed an activation on a unit, you just move on to the next unit. It just means that that particular one can't move. Dan's included that as an alternative rule. So it's still an optional thing, and he describes very well his thinking behind that and his reasoning for keeping the original rules in place. But ultimately, as Dan said himself, this is a sandbox. It's a set of rules which works really well, but you can tweak around the edges, make it work for you. It's got to be fun at the end of the day. And I'm sure some people will continue to use that alternative failed activations rule. So one of the areas that's received some attention is that of the fantastical rules that I touched on briefly earlier. So these are the extra rules that you can add when you're building your units and your leaders to give them that character, to turn them into the things that you want them to be. And there's basically, this goes from page 84 to 123. So what's that? Nearly 40 pages of various fantastical rules. So you've got things like flyer, hatred, fearful, fearsome and fearless, all the different versions of the fear there. You've also got things like magical arms and armour as well. So things like enchanted blades and mystical armour to enhance your troops and, as I say, give them that character. All of these cost points. So, for example, the Ring of Uncertain Power costs you 2 army points. That's quite an interesting one, which I'm pretty sure is new, where you can give a unit this particular magical item, and you roll randomly at the start of the game to see whether that's effectively a boon or a curse of one of the other magical abilities. So that's all added in as you're creating the armies. One of the fantastical abilities is spellcaster, which, again, similar to the initial set of rules, you have a unit type. So, for example, you might have elite foot, and you can give them spellcaster, and that would be a particularly strong wizard, sort of your Gandalf types, or you could give it something like scouts or lightfoot. But spellcaster is effectively an add-on skill, if you like, which allows that character to become that magic user. What's new in this set of rules is that you've actually got spellcaster levels, which determines how many spells they can actually cast. And in the new spells and spell casting section, rather than the short list, I'm thinking 6 in the original set of rules of spells that you could cast, you now have a colour of magic that your magic user studies, and that determines which spells they actually have access to. And that can vary from game to game and so on as well. So there's a lot more flavour to the magic, again, without creating any kind of unnecessary complications or breaking the rules in any way at all. It just adds that extra little bit of flavour. As far as scenarios goes, and this is really where the game sort of starts to come to life, there are 12 scenarios in this new edition. In the original edition there were 6. You may recognise 1 or 2 of these. We've got the gory bloodbath on the Plains of Doom, which is that sort of straight up one-on-one fight across the table, if you like, which is always the best place to start, I think. But there are, as I say, 12 scenarios altogether now, and some rules again brought over from the previous set around scoring glory points and quests. So you can choose, as well as the objectives within each scenario, you could choose to pick specific quests to enhance your glory in that game, and that might be things like, I'm going to destroy the leader of the opposition, or there's a whole sort of variety of them there. We've also got a campaign guide, which is, again, I need to give this a proper read, but looks really interesting. Just some general ideas, but then a very specific sort of, I was going to say ladder, but I don't think that's the right word. Little campaign system where you can connect a series of games together to make that, to bring that kind of level of interest to your games as well. And then a section on selecting your warband for the campaign and so on. But then towards the back again enhanced because of the space we've got available. We've got a selection of sample warbands and a bestiary to sort of describe some sample sort of magical creatures and so on that you might come across, and some suggestions on how to kind of stat those up. The first page I turned to when I looked at this last night was this one, the Barbarica, which refers to the Copplestone Castings 15mm figures that North Star do. I've never bought them. I don't think I've even seen them in the flesh, but I've always been quite... it's on my list of things I'd like to do, and I have to say this has given me that extra little bit of impetus into creating perhaps a little 15mm or a pair of 15mm armies to play Dragon Rampant. Which includes all the sort of types within that range, the bog people, the Northlanders and the Picts and so on. And then we've got some other sort of sample armies, and again it's quite clear these are just samples and just ideas of how you could reproduce these kind of armies on the table. I looked at the dwarves one last night because I've got a dwarf army, and took a couple of these lines to use for the units I've got, but definitely changed a few out as well because they didn't quite fit with my ideas of what my dwarf army was going to look like. So I haven't counted up how many sample warbands there are, but there's quite a few, and certainly absolutely enough to get everybody going there. So, final thoughts. I'm very excited to actually try these out and get them on the table. I mentioned at the top that it's a game that I've come back to pretty consistently over the years. I would say I haven't played it a great deal of late, and that's not because I've gone off it in any way. It's just because I've been my wargaming time, which has been quite limited anyway, has been taken up with some other projects as well. And as I mentioned, like a lot of you, I'm a bit of a wargames butterfly, and I do tend to flit around. But this has certainly got me excited to get the Dragon Rampant armies out. I've already had a bit of a look at the lists of what I've got, and typically thought about what other things I might want to buy and paint to enhance those armies, not least those 15mm ones, but I think I've got plenty of 28mm stuff to get on with as well. That was a bit whistle stop. I hope it was of interest. I purposefully didn't want to do a chapter by chapter read through, because I think that's up to you to go and buy this and enjoy it for yourselves. And no spoilers as far as the rules go. I will be doing a video of a playthrough, whether that's going to be a solo game or with one of my chums, we'll find out. But watch out for that in the near future. I hope you enjoyed it. As I say, please like, subscribe, comment, do all that good stuff. And there will be more train videos coming up in the near future for those of you that have got to the end of this one and are wondering where they are.